John Davison versus Steve Robinson in the Big Fight Live. That's after the news now on Central.
Good evening, the news and sport from ITN. Tonight's headlines: ceasefire in Srebrenica as the UN prepares an airlift. Celebrations in Los Angeles after 2 policemen are found guilty in the Rodney King beating trial. And a senior South African politician is arrested in connection with the killing of Chris Harney.
And tonight's main sports headline: Mark Hughes tightens Manchester United's grip on the Premier League title.
All sides in the Bosnian conflict are waiting to see if a new ceasefire, due to come into effect a few minutes ago, will hold through the night. There's been fierce street fighting in the outskirts of Srebrenica all evening. At the same time, the United Nations Security Council is meeting to discuss tougher sanctions against the Serbs. UN troops who tried to get into Srebrenica to monitor events were turned back by the Serbs.
The moment that highlighted the impotence of the United Nations Protection Force, the Canadian commander ordering his soldiers to return to their base. The company had set off hoping to be in Srebrenica before noon, but despite promises made less than 24 hours earlier, the Bosnian Serb army refused to allow the UN advance party through their lines. Reluctantly, the Canadian commander told his men to turn back.
This in no way is a withdrawal. It is our intention to cross once permission has been given, and we are anxious to do so.
Harrowing radio messages from Srebrenica explained the Serbian reluctance to allow the UN in. The voice, barely audible at times, said the Bosnian Serb army had launched an all-out offensive with tanks, rockets and artillery. Serbian infantry were trying to enter the town on 2 fronts. Many civilians had been killed. While his soldiers were shelling Srebrenica, General Mladic, commander of the Bosnian Serb army, was meeting his Muslim counterpart and UN officials at Sarajevo airport. They agreed a ceasefire to take effect tonight. UN helicopters are now standing by to begin an airlift of Srebrenica's injured, if this latest Serbian promise is kept. The events of today give no reason for confidence. It's been a day of frustration and humiliation for the United Nations Protection Force. The Security Council, sitting thousands of miles away, may have declared Srebrenica a safe area, but its troops on the ground remain powerless to prevent a slaughter. Like the rest of us, they can only wait to see how many citizens of the so-called safe area are still alive tomorrow morning. Paul Davis, ITN, Bosnia.
And in another part of Bosnia, at least 50 people were killed in clashes between Croats and Muslims. British troops based near Vitez helped move the dead and wounded to hospital. The Prime Minister, John Smith, has demanded the backing of the UN Security Council for tougher sanctions against the Serbs. The Labour leader, John Smith, has broken ranks with the government and now insists military action is needed.
I believe it is now necessary for the United Nations to issue an ultimatum to Serbia that unless a ceasefire is made effective, the United Nations will authorize airstrikes against Serbian lines of communication in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Black and white community leaders throughout America, including President Clinton, have welcomed the verdict in the Rodney King trial in Los Angeles. 2 of the policemen caught on videotape beating him have been found guilty. 2 other officers were acquitted. The city's been quiet tonight.
Celebrations in Los Angeles today, and on the streets where last year's riot began, victory signs, even from the officers in 1 police car. The jury's verdict came just after 7 this morning. In the black community, they held their breath.
Stacey C. Kern, guilty.
The 2 main culprits in the beating found guilty. Sergeant Stacey Kuhn, who directed it, and Officer Lawrence Powell, seen here raining most of the blows on Rodney King. Most here believe justice has been done, even though the 2 other officers were acquitted.
Don't you know that this gives us hope? This is hope for tomorrow.
The lawyer for the convicted sergeant was asked if it was a just verdict.
No.
The prosecution thinks differently.
I think a year ago, the conscience of the community, the conscience of the nation, cried out for justice, and this verdict provides justice.
The two convicted officers now face up to 10 years in jail, though they won't be sentenced until August. Thousands of police officers are now on the streets, ready for trouble. Violence seems unlikely, the city is calm, though many shopkeepers were preparing just in case. It was the most important civil rights case in decades. It turned LA into an armed and terrified city. Tonight, the city is breathing a collective sigh of relief. Bill Neely, ITN, Los Angeles.
In South Africa, a senior member of the right-wing Conservative Party, Clive Derby-Lewis, has been arrested over the killing of the radical black leader Chris Hani. Demonstrations were held all over the country today to protest at Hani's death. In one of them, a white man drove into a crowd of protesters and shot 2 blacks dead.
Clive Derby-Lewis, an MP and a leading member of the Conservative Party, has long been a figurehead of the far right. More recently as head of the Stallard Foundation, a forum for conservative thinkers which has attracted right-wing European émigrés. Among them, it seems, Hani's alleged assassin Jan Wallace, who was born in Poland. It's said Mr. Derby-Lewis's association with Wallace may date back 8 years. The arrest of Clive Derby-Lewis tonight not only broadens the conspiracy behind Hani's assassination, but also seems to place it directly in the conservative mainstream and in the heart of South Africa's parliamentary politics. Earlier today, the ugly face of racism was exposed when gun-carrying right-wingers from the Afrikaner resistance movement taunted ANC marchers. The emotions that have erupted since Chris Hani's murder now in raw confrontation.
This is civil war, man. This is civil war. This is the start of a civil war.
Killed up a whole lot of bloody bosses. Just talking doesn't help.
Suddenly, shots rang out. Seconds later, police rushed towards a blue van, smashing the windows and dragging out the white occupant at gunpoint. Nearby lay the bodies of 3 blacks who'd been shot. 2 were dead and 1 more injured. As police pinned down the suspect, the crowd wailed over their fallen comrades. One more incident to raise the temperature of anger and hatred. Jeremy Thompson, ITN, Johannesburg.
The Education Secretary, John Patten, told teachers today to think twice before boycotting this summer's national school tests. But he refused to comment on reports that the government is planning to rush through legislation to stop the boycott.
John Patten spelt out his message to teachers clearly today. Speaking at a conference in London, he told them to think carefully before boycotting national school tests. The government, he said, will not be moved.
So I'm asking teachers contemplating boycotts to think twice. Away from the heady atmosphere of the annual conference, where rhetoric comes easy and boycott mania abounds, reflect very carefully on what boycotting could mean for you, for your pupils, for their parents, for your school and its standing locally, and for your profession if you refuse to carry out these tests.
Today it was reported that government ministers are now considering legislation to prevent the teachers' boycott.
Well, I think it's an acknowledgement that they can't persuade the profession to undertake these tests knowing that their education is sound, because they're not sound, and therefore the only way they can be certain that they're going to be implemented is to turn to the law. But what an indictment of education policy. If you have to force teachers to do things when teachers know them to be educationally unsound, what a confession to make.
The National Association of Schoolmasters, Union of Women Teachers, is already boycotting the tests, with the NUT poised to ballot members on joining the industrial action. Peter Sharp, ITN, in central London.
More than 1,000 pensioners marched in Glasgow to protest at the introduction of VAT on domestic fuel bills. The pensioners say the increase will hit them hard because the colder weather in Scotland means they're forced to spend more of their income on heating costs. The Duke of York has been to Northern Ireland to see the Army's newest regiment granted the freedom of Carrickfergus in County Antrim. He's Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Irish Regiment. The 4 British climbers who were lost in the Caucasus Mountains in Russia are celebrating with family and friends back home tonight. The men had lived on chocolate bars and melted snow for nearly a week. Now with the football and the rest of today's sport, here's Graham Miller.
Manchester United improved their chances of winning England's first Premier League championship with a 3-0 win against Chelsea at Old Trafford. It's given them a 4-point lead over second-placed Aston Villa, who now must beat Manchester City tomorrow to stay in the hunt. At the bottom, Crystal Palace edged closer to survival with a goalless draw at Leeds. They now have a 3-point advantage over Sheffield United, Oldham and Forest, who all lost today. Middlesbrough, who didn't play, are all but down already. Meanwhile, in the race at the top of the first, a Phil Barber goal that might have started out as a cross put leaders Newcastle 1 down at Millwall. But a Lee Clark equaliser in the second half put them back on course. And in the 73rd minute, Andrew Cole's 24th of the season gave Newcastle all 3 points. West Ham had an easier time of it. Peter Butler's first half goal put the Hammers on their way to a crushing victory over Brentford. So Newcastle on course for the title. Portsmouth, with their 10th win in 11, look set to go up with them. Millwall's defeat leaves West Ham, Swindon, Leicester and Tranmere, the likely 4, to play off for the remaining promotion place. In Scotland, Rangers are heading for their 5th successive championship. Gary McSwegan got 2 in their victory over Partick Thistle, but Aberdeen's win over Hearts means the Champagne must stay on ice for another week. And Wycombe Wanderers are in the Football League for the first time in their history. They gained promotion from the Vauxhall Conference today, despite being beaten by Altrincham. Racing, and there was a dramatic victory for Run for Free in the Scottish National. The 6-1 third favourite was left standing at the start, but made up the distance to win. Graham Good is the commentator.
One more fence to jump, and Merry Master comes to take in a tired horse, and Run for Free gets momentum away from the fence, but it's Run for Free and Merry Master dueling up towards the line. Neither horse is going to give in, and it's going to be Run for Free, the top weight, who lifts it in the 9 strides. A dramatic race, Run for Free from Merry Master.
So the full SP. First, Run for Free, 6-1. Second, Merry Master, 28-1. Third, Mr. Ed, 12-1. And fourth was Eshoness at 14-1. England and Ireland are both through to the last 8 of Rugby's World Sevens Championship at Murrayfield. They're joined by the 2 teams rated favourites, Fiji and Western Samoa. Wales and the host Scotland both went out.
Scotland, the hosts, invented the 7-a-side game, but today Australia showed them how to play it. David Campese, who else, providing the killer touch. 2 second-half consolation tries gave the home crowd something to cheer about, but Scotland are out before the halfway stage. A reserve England 7 came up against the brute strength of tournament co-favourites Western Samoa. And their running skills too. First blood to Western Samoa, but both teams go through to the last 8, and England showed in the second half they're worth their place. Wales needed to beat the other favourites, Fiji, to have a chance of staying in. The first half belonged to Fiji, scorching into a 21-point lead. Wales turned on the heroics in the second half, but fell 4 points short of survival.
Leslie Charteris, the thriller writer who created The Saint, has died at the age of 85. It was the TV series of his novel starring Roger Moore that earned Charteris worldwide acclaim. James Forlong has this report.
Darling, this is the famous, or infamous, Simon Templar.
There can be few authors so successful in exploiting a single character as Leslie Charteris was with The Saint. The first Simon Templar novel was published in the 1920s, though the 1962 TV series starring Roger Moore ensured his worldwide fame. And, like the character he created, Charteris was a lover of the good life, listing his recreations as eating, drinking, horse racing and loafing.
He was a very knowledgeable man. He knew more about most things than anybody. Although he had been ailing for some time, you know, it's always a terrible shock when a friend goes.
Leslie Charteris wrote 54 Saint books, which were translated into 15 languages. In 1992, he received the Cartier Golden Dagger from the Crime Writers Association, one of only 7 authors ever to receive the award.
And that's the news and sport. From Graham and me, good night.
Good night.
Hello, good evening. The north of Scotland, the southern half of England and Wales may not do too badly tomorrow, but there'll be plenty of rain in between. The satellite picture is a good place to start, see how things are shaping up. The cloud did break up in many places today. Most of us saw a little bit of sunshine, but out to the west you can already see this next area of cloud rushing in from the west. We stopped the sequence earlier today. The cloud is still out to the west, but if we have a look at how things are shaping up for tomorrow, it looks as if this bulge of cloud is going to come across Northern Ireland, Northern England and southern Scotland, producing a fair bit of rain there. So let's come back to tonight then. Well, rain already moving across Northern Ireland. It'll be into southern Scotland and many parts of Northern England overnight. Some of it fairly heavy, especially up in the northwest there. Further south, a grey, misty, drizzly night, especially near the coasts, but mild virtually everywhere. So it's that northern slot across Northern England, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales. It will be wet tomorrow. Far north of Scotland, though, not faring too badly. Some sunny spells, but the odd shower as well. Further south, breezy in the south, quite strong southwest winds, a few sunny spells, and they'll help to boost temperatures up to around 14. So it's fairly mild in spite of all the cloud and the rain up in the northwest. Here's a summary.
Central Weather, sponsored by Legal & General.
Hello, we've got more cloud and drizzly rain spreading up the region through tonight, and it's turning misty now too, and if you've just come in you'll have noticed it's very mild out there. Temperatures not dropping any lower than the mid-40s, touch of the tropics nearly. Well, mild and moist anyway. Means a murky Sunday, especially over the hilly areas, with some brightness for those areas to the east of high ground. Breezy but mild. That's tomorrow. Bye-bye.